In today's video, we're going to discuss all the latest NHL free agent signings, plus we're going to have a look at some of the more interesting names on the list of RFA players who did not receive a qualifying offer from their teams and are now unrestricted free agents. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're going to discuss a lot of the latest NHL free agent signings. Now a lot of these guys have been signed up. Some of them came today, some of them were yesterday, the day before. Since most of these signings were fairly minor signings, I kind of let them add up a little bit to kind of squeeze into one video here instead of doing a dedicated video on each player, which didn't really seem to make sense. So let's jump in here and take a look at all the latest signings here over the last few days. Plus, as I mentioned, we're also here in a few minutes take a look at some of the more notable RFA players who did not receive qualifying offers and are now unrestricted free agents and free to sign with any team. There's some interesting names there that I want to have a look at here momentarily. But let's jump in here. Now, the Pittsburgh Penguins have made a variety of signings. The most notable one coming today, signing Bryan Rust to a 4-year contract extension. The Bryan Rust contract has a value of $14 million over 4 years, as I mentioned, putting a cap hit at 3.5. So that's a pretty fair contract, I think, considering the Stanley Cup victories and the fact that Bryan Rust has been a relatively good soldier for the Penguins. Bryan Rust would have been an RFA over the next 2 years, so at the end of this contract, he will be a UFA. So basically, they're buying up a little bit of UFA years as well with this deal. So if you think about how he's likely to progress in the next few years, that's pretty fair market value, I think. So pretty good contract signing by the Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins have also signed youngsters Daniel Sprong and Dominic Simon, both to 2-year deals worth $1.5 million for an annual cap hit of $750,000. Both of those players are expected to be given more ice time and a bigger role in the coming season. The Detroit Red Wings have also signed a couple of young forwards as well, including forward Tyler Bertuzzi. Bertuzzi looked like he fit in pretty well with the Red Wings after being acquired. Tyler Bertuzzi's been signed to a 2-year deal worth $2.8 million for an annual cap hit of $1.4. So I think that's a pretty fair contract. I do expect Bertuzzi to play a fairly big role with the Wings here over the next few years, so I think that's a fairly good value contract for Detroit. Now, they've also signed forward Martin Frk to a 1-year deal. Frk was originally an RFA, was not given a qualifying offer, but just because players are not given qualified offers, it doesn't mean they won't re-sign with the team. Some players have arbitration rights, and it's basically a negotiation tactic for the team to kind of gain more leverage. Yes, they do risk losing the player because they become UFA, where they're not tendered their qualifying offer, but at the same time, does give a little bit more flexibility around what they can offer, especially for players who may have to take the same or less money as they were given before. So obviously this was a deal Detroit did not necessarily want to give up on Martin Frk, but they didn't want to go down the RFA qualifying offer road, so instead they've signed Martin Frk to a 1-year deal worth just over $1 million. The Vancouver Canucks have re-signed forward Marcus Granlund to a 1-year deal. His contract's worth $1.475 million, so that's a pretty decent value, short-term deal for the Vancouver Canucks. Obviously, the Canucks have a ton of prospects at the forward positions and are going to be looking to have expanded roles this year and beyond. So signing him to a shorter-term deal gives them a little bit more flexibility to see with how he fits with the team longer term. And depending on how their prospects progress, it's hard to say how long he'll be with the organization. At the same time, though, it gives him an opportunity to continue to prove himself here. And if he continues to fit and play well, then he can possibly look at getting an extension later on. Obviously, the Canucks appear to be looking at some other free agents outside of the organization, the guys that can play center as well. It's been rumored that they've been speaking to the agents for Jay Beagle, Tyler Bozak, just to name a few. So they're certainly in the market to acquire a veteran center to play in that middle six or bottom six role. We'll be interested to keep an eye on the Canucks and see what else they do in the free agent market or within possibly making a trade. But I do see them likely acquiring some sort of veteran center here, like I said, to play in either the bottom or middle six role. St. Louis Blues have opted to re-sign forward Nikita Soshnikov, who they picked up from the Toronto Maple Leafs last season. It was speculated that Soshnikov could end up going back to the KHL, but he's been given 1 more year at the NHL level to prove himself. His deal's worth $800,000, so we'll see with Soshnikov if he can catch on with the Blues and play more of a regular role. Otherwise, if things don't work out this year, I'd say Soshnikov likely does head back to the KHL. But if things improve for him, then he very well may stick around and end up getting himself an extension. The Ottawa Senators have re-signed defenseman Chris Weidman to a 1-year, $1 million deal. Obviously, it's been known that Chris Weidman wasn't really clear if they were going to give him a new contract offer or not. He spent the bulk of last season out with a torn hamstring. He had a bit of a freak accident against the Penguins early in the season, and Evgeny Malkin fell on top of him, and you could tell as soon as it happened, and it was a fairly significant injury. He ended up with a torn hamstring and missed about 3/4 of the year. Obviously, Wideman had been progressing pretty solidly with the Senators over the past couple of seasons, playing mostly a third-pair defense role. Obviously, in the Senators' case, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to be keeping a right-hand shot, offensively gifted defenseman here. He's not a player that's played a huge role, but he certainly can play, a third-pair role for sure. Possibly, with the right opportunity and the right partner, I could see Wideman maybe even being in a second-pair type of guy. We'll see what this year brings for opportunity for the Ottawa Senators and Chris Wideman, but nice to see him stay in the fold for another shot here at being an NHL regular player. The Dallas Stars have re-signed Stephen Johns as well. Stephen Johns ended up with a longer-term deal here. He got 3 years, $7 million for an annual cap hit of 2.35. So obviously Johns has played fairly well for Dallas on the back end. So not a big surprise to see him get re-signed. That deal didn't take very long to get off the books here. Johns is one of the ones that signed a few days ago. But as I mentioned, we didn't bother. We're doing a dedicated video on it just as of yet, waiting for some of these other more minor deals to kind of add up. So there's more to talk about here in the video. But lots of good value contracts here all around. None of these deals that were signed are crazy deals. Or long-term big money type of contracts. A lot of these are younger players given shorter-term deals for the most part here. Lower value, still trying to prove themselves and earn those bigger, longer-term contracts in the NHL. So lots of good value signings here for the teams that we talked about today. Now onto the RFAs that were not qualified. There's certainly some interesting names. Obviously some rumors floating around about a few of them where they may end up landing. A lot of these guys likely will get NHL jobs, but not all of them are certainly guaranteed by any means. But certainly some notable names here. So let's just run through some of the names and we'll kind of speculate a little bit on a few of them. Obviously the big one is Washington Capitals' Devontae Smith-Pelly. It was quite surprising to see the Capitals not qualify him. It doesn't mean they don't want to sign him, but at the same time it does put him as a UFA and make it a little bit risky that they may end up signing him if other teams try to negotiate, maybe offer something a little bit better than what the Capitals are doing. Based on his playoff run, I'm sure they want to keep him, but at the same time, his regular season performances over the last number of years have been underwhelming at best. So at the same time, I'm sure they don't want to end up overpaying for that playoff run. It's hard to say if he can duplicate that. It was nice to see him finally have some success and ended up winning the Stanley Cup with the Capitals. He's a hard-working player for the most part here and has really earned his opportunity with Washington. But a lot of the other teams he's played with over the years hasn't really worked out for him. In order for him to get a longer-term deal, he's obviously going to have a little bit more success than just a playoff run. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here with DSP. I fully suspect the Capitals are negotiating with him, trying to work out a new deal. Pretty likely that he stays, but now that he's going to be a UFA, there's certainly going to be some other teams swooping in here and perhaps try to snag him away from the Washington Capitals. A few other names that I found quite notable. One was Anthony Duclair, the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, they made that trade with the Coyotes during the season. Obviously, the Chicago Blackhawks picked up Duclair during the season from the Coyotes. Duclair had a few moments that where he looked pretty good, but overall wasn't the greatest fit in Chicago. It was assumed he'd be given an opportunity at least to play in the top six with some of their offensive players, but things never really gelled and caught on for Duclair there. There has been some speculation, and this is not necessarily from the team, that perhaps we could see him land in Montreal. Obviously, he's from the province of Quebec. They just traded for Max Domi. Obviously, we know at one point Domi and Duclair had some great chemistry at the World Juniors, as well as some with the Coyotes organization before things kind of fell off there. So we'll see if maybe the Habs are interested. But of course, they do have plenty of wingers already. So hard to say if they have any interest, but it was something that was mentioned and speculated. But we'll see. I'm sure Duclair will get work somewhere. Vancouver Canucks defenseman Derek Pouliot was not granted a qualifying offer as well, but they are continuing to negotiate with him and are working on possibly looking at a one-year deal that likely is going to get done. Ottawa Senators did not qualify defenseman Freddie Claesson. Claesson a few years back looked like he was making some solid growth and some, really growing as a defenseman and earning himself a regular spot in the lineup. But last year did not go so well, and it looks as though the Freddie Claesson's time in Ottawa unfortunately has come to an end, but I'd like to see him catch on somewhere. I think he can be a regular NHL defenseman given the right opportunity. The Pittsburgh Penguins opted not to qualify forwards Riley Sheahan and Tom Kuhnhackl. Obviously, Kuhnhackl didn't have a great season. It's unlikely that they will continue to negotiate with him. I think his time in Pittsburgh is over. Sheahan, on the other hand, I wouldn't completely say it's over for him with the Penguins. Hard to say, but I would probably think more than likely he's going to end up moving on, see if another team will give him an opportunity. But it is possible Pittsburgh might try to re-sign him. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but some interesting names nonetheless. Goalies Robin Lehner and Peter Mrazek were not tendered qualifying offers by their respective teams. We did already talk about Robin Lehner a little bit the other day in our top 20 NHL free agents to keep your eye on for free agency season coming up here. So obviously Lehner is going to draw significant interest. Mrazek, I think, will get some interest for sure. I can see him landing somewheres. But both of them, they need to get some consistency going to their games in order to keep a regular NHL job here and have any hopes of ever getting a longer-term contract. But both of those guys are goalies. I mean, the teams to keep your eye open here for would be teams like the Islanders, the Blackhawks, the Hurricanes. Those are teams definitely looking for goaltenders. Hopefully for their sake, one of these teams will give them a shot, but certainly no guarantees. I think Lehner and Mrazek likely do find work with a couple of these clubs, but hard to say who lands where. Defenseman Joe Morrow of the Winnipeg Jets was not tendered a qualifying offer as well. That was a little bit surprising. He did play a fairly good role with the Jets on the back end. Not to say that they won't want to re-sign him. I think they will. But again, another case here where they didn't do the qualifying offer. They'll probably take their chances. They will likely try to bring Joe Morrow back on the right value of a contract that they'd like to see get done here. But at the same time, they do have a lot of big decisions to make in Winnipeg. They have a lot of contract extensions to work on. And they do have a little bit of a cap crunch facing them with all their young players having so much success and do some raises here. So be interesting to see what happens in Winnipeg, but wouldn't rule out Joe Morrow returning, but now he will become a UFA. A couple players out of the Montreal Canadiens organization, one being Daniel Carr, goaltender Zach Fucale as well, were not given their qualifying offer, so their time in Montreal appears to be over. I did not get the sense that either of those guys are going to continue negotiating with the Habs, or that the Habs are interested in bringing them back in any other capacity. It's kind of surprising. I thought they might keep Fucale around longer term here, but obviously they've got Carey Price, they've got Antti Niemi, they've got Charlie Lindgren. I guess they don't feel like they can have enough playing time to offer Fucale to continue his development with the Montreal organization. If there's no injuries this year, or at least no significant ones, then we could be looking at Price and Niemi in Montreal. Charlie Lindgren being the starter in Laval, and obviously, you know, the top call-up should somebody go down with an injury. Because of that, I guess that kind of eliminates the need for Zach Fucale. Obviously, he's a goalie that came in a junior with a lot of promise and a lot of potential. So we'll see here. He's still young enough that he may get signed by another team, but he's now looking for work as a UFA. The LA Kings opted not to qualify forward Tobias Rieder as well after picking him up last year from Arizona. That's mainly due to a cap crunch that they're under right now. The LA Kings really don't have a lot of cap space, and they need to try to get some things figured out. Doesn't mean they may circle back to Rieder later, depending on what else they end up doing. But it looks as though his time in LA likely is up, though. I'm sure he's not going to wait around for them. He's going to be looking for other teams to possibly sign a contract with. Tobias Rieder, I think we can safely say, is for the most part here a cap victim, but obviously his performance would have been better, would have increased the odds of him keeping his position with the Kings. But at the same time, that's, like I said, the salary cap played a big role in that decision. The Colorado Avalanche have opted not to offer a qualifying offer to Nail Yakupov. So could Yakupov's time in the NHL finally be over? The former #1 overall selection, has gone through a number of teams now. Obviously, put in his time with the Oilers, played in St. Louis, played in Colorado. It's never really worked out for him. He's had his moments here and there where it looked like maybe we saw flashes of the player that got him to the #1 draft spot in his draft year, but he's never really developed into anything like he was expected to be. So I would say more than likely Yakupov's time in the NHL is going to be coming to an end, and he's likely going to end up either playing in the KHL or one of the European leagues, would be my guess. But I'd be quite surprised if Nail Yakupov is given any more NHL opportunities. One last quick note to mention here as well, just another quick move that was going down just as we were finishing recording of this video. The Ottawa Senators have placed forward Alex Burrows on waivers for the purpose of buyout. So obviously it looks as though his time in Ottawa is coming to an end. I don't think any Senators fans will be upset about that at all. The only thing they'll be upset about is the fact that of what they gave up to bring in Alex Burrows a few years ago. Obviously, bringing him in was not a terrible idea for that veteran leadership for the playoff run. He did serve a purpose, but immediately giving him that 2-year contract extension, as well as giving up young prospect Jonathan Dahlen, at this point in time, that trade looks pretty bad. So another mark on Pierre Dorian's resume that's certainly not going in his favor for sure, but it looks as though at least they're freeing up a roster spot and doing the right thing now instead of keeping him around and suppressing another prospect for another season in Ottawa. Obviously this year I fully suspect to see them have a lot of young guys in their lineup given an opportunity to play, and this is just another step heading in that direction. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.